Just wait a moment to get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon and welcome to FlexPro's winter webinar, a panel on project management excellence called Driving Project Success. I'd like to thank everyone for taking just the short half hour to attend today. So we're going to get started, and I'll teach you a little bit about using Livestorm first. So number one, the meeting is recorded. If you've registered for this, you'll be receiving a copy at the conclusion of the webinar. You're on mute, so don't worry if you're making any noise in the background or have anything open. You're on mute, and no one else will see it. Feel free on the right side to use the questions tab. Those will be anonymous questions you can ask the panel. Otherwise, if you'd like to interact with the panel or anyone else who is watching along from home or the office, feel free to use the chat feature, as you can see a few people have there. Over the course of the webinar and panel, we'll have polls pop also on the right side, so feel free again to anonymously participate in make sure we're addressing your concerns and things are interactive. And then finally, as I mentioned, a copy of the audio and video will be sent following the conclusion of today's panel session. Today's panel is brought to you by the FlexPro Group, delivering project management expertise to the life sciences industry. Feel free to follow us at www.theflexprogroup.com. Check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter for more information. And a little about who we are as a company. FlexPro is a project management consulting firm focused solely on the life sciences, concentrating in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and med device spaces. We've been headquartered in Greater Philadelphia area since 2008 and recently opened a second New Jersey location. We help companies move from development all the way to providing project management expertise in the areas of product development and commercialization, supply chain optimization, integration management, and early stage acceleration. So let's get started with today's panel. I'm your speakers today. Again, my name is Richard Ellis. I'm your manager of marketing and business development for the FlexPro Group. We're going to go one by one through these panelists here. You can see them below the screen. I'll ask first Ken Sabata, Senior Project Manager, introduce himself.
Thanks, Rich. Good afternoon. As Rich said, my name is Ken Sabata. I'm a certified project manager, project management professional with an engineering degree and an MBA. I have over 25 years experience working as a project or program manager. My most extensive background is in managing cross-functional teams, developing new products, but in many different industries. My specific life science and pharmaceutical project management experience has been in reestablishing business capability, both in laboratory and manufacturing readiness while under consent decree, managing teams to submit ANDAs in a generic pharma business, establishing labeling capability to meet new FDA requirements, and leading a team to submit their IND on an RX to OTC initiative. In these very different settings, I've faced many different and difficult challenges managing a project team, and happy to interact on that.
Thanks, Ken. Next, I'd like to introduce Jose Aguayo, Senior Project Manager.
Hello, my name is Jose Aguayo. Just a little bit about my personal life. I'm married, and my wife and I have 3 children between the two of us. I call Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, my home. Where I'm actually from is really debatable. My parents were in the military, and we moved frequently. I believe I have been doing project management much longer than I think. Anyway, every time we projects such as packing things up and moving a deadline project by myself. As for my professional life, I am an MP and I am PMP certified. I have 26 years of supply chain experience in the science industry. 10 of those years are in project management. I have worked with a wide variety of projects, including divestments, technical transfer, new drug supply integration, SAP implementation, labeling changes, process improvements, recall, warehouse management systems, and advanced planning systems. I've been with FlexPro for 3 years. I enjoy leading projects because they're clearly defined and always challenge me to keep up in line with them. Also, projects tend to be finite with defined business. This allows me to move on to new and exciting opportunities and work with different people. Projects allow me to learn and grow professionally, build relationships with different team members.
Thanks, Jose. If you wouldn't mind, move a little closer to the mic there. having some feedback from the group. They're having trouble hearing you a little bit.
How about now?
Much better. Great. Next, I'd like to introduce Tanya Bongiovanni, Senior Project Manager at the FlexPro Group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Bongiovanni. Good afternoon. Just to give you a little bit of information about my background. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree in neuroscience in 2001. 2006, I received a master's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology, and I began my career as a research scientist in the biopharmaceutical industry and worked as a molecular bench scientist for very many years. After receiving my degree, I worked for companies such as J&J, Regeneron, and Celgene. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to begin working as a scientific project manager with a startup company that had a captivating drug development pipeline. This really encouraged me to grow as a project manager, and I was a lead PM for the R&D, manufacturing, and quality departments. Since then, I've had the opportunity to expand my drug development project management expertise, and I have managed all compounds from early discovery through phase 4 and post-marketing and safety and pharmacovigilance as well. My current role is extremely interesting. I'm supporting a client in North Jersey for FlexPro as a senior PM, and I'm supporting local program teams and monitoring timelines for compounds in early discovery through phase 3 to market launch. So I'm really happy to be here today and answer anyone's questions.
Thank you, Tanya. And finally, Kate Geringer, Senior Project Manager of the FlexPro Group.
Hi, thanks, Rich. I have 17 years in formal end-to-end innovation project management and around the same in clinical research trial management. So most of my experience has been in managing cross-functional core teams and deep diving with deliverables work streams on RX to OTC switch programs, as well as innovation projects, artwork changes, value engineering initiatives, all in the consumer healthcare space. I also do have some experience, about 3 years, in end-to-end project management in the cosmetic industry, where I learned that speed and flexibility are paramount. I was lead project manager in 2 RX to OTC switch programs, both of which successfully launched in the United States US market, and in key markets around the world.
Thank you, Kate. And I just thank you everyone for joining us today. And, we have almost 100 years combined of PM experience here on the panel. So looking forward to hearing us get into some topics today. So speaking of which, let's start with communication. This one's to you, Ken. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of communication in managing a project team?
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. Actually, I've been known to say, parroting off of or piloting off of real estate, who says location, location, location. I say communication, communication, communication is really important in project management. And what I've actually found is that inter-team communication is really important. Making sure that you don't end up with functional silos on your team, and making sure that your cross-functional team members understand each other's needs. What I've successfully done in the past is made sure that my team understands sort of applying a supplier and customer model in their communications, making sure that they really understand what each other needs from each other and that they're providing it. And that's also critical to another aspect of project management. It really helps drive an understanding of the task definition, what needs to get done, and what are the interdependencies between those cross-functional team members and tasks.
Thanks, Ken. That actually goes along with one of the questions we just received. Jose, I'll let you take this one. Can you talk a little bit about meeting preparation and the way that you're making sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of communication?
Sure. Yeah, when I have a project, I create a clear communication plan. I kind of go through with the team, the core team, and show them how information can propagate pretty quickly and get out of control if we don't follow that plan. I create a standing agenda that has a cadence, right? The slides will be the same slides every meeting. And I also measure the attendance that we have in our meetings. If you don't attend the meeting, sometimes they may not be well informed. So I also put a lot of emphasis on attending the meetings, copy them on meeting notes, and I also remind them that the communication channels are what we established and we agreed upon. It would be of no value to any of our team members to, let's say, go to a stakeholder and tell them something that is misinformed. So what I do is I try to keep them in mind and agreement with the communication plan, and it's there every meeting we go, okay, so here's our stakeholders, and I know that we change as well. We may have a stakeholder who moves on to another role, invite them to the meeting and explain to them how they're going to hear project status.
Thanks, Jose. You mentioned a little bit there about communicating the channels and making sure that everyone's on the same page. Kate, I'm going to shift this to you a little bit and working with a global organization. I'm talking about the way that you're communicating within a global organization and maybe managing some of those complexities.
So I think, like Ken said, although he said communication, I add to that clarity. So, I mean, we start out our projects with, a vision and engagement and, in addition to that, clarity. So within a really large organization, we have to be aware of virtual communication. So, this is a world now where technology is really king. So I think it's really, really important. And very basic to understand your technology and whether you are understood around the world. And it's our job, not the audience's job, to struggle to understand. It's our job as project managers to make sure that we are understood so that we're speaking into their hearing. A very large organization, it's really, really a good idea to have sort of a cadence or a communication rhythm. So how often are you communicating? Who is the audience for that communication? And it is the one source of the truth coming from, say, the core team. It goes back to the siloed conversations that go on around the hub, for instance. So I think it's critical to have, pulling everything together that Ken and Jose have said, a communication plan. How do my stakeholders want to receive information, and knowing that their information is aligned within that project team, for instance.
I like that. It's just communication and clarity. It seems that you go from one end of the spectrum to the other, is getting the message out and making sure it's a very clear message. Mm-hmm. Tanya, I originally was going to ask you about communication, but I actually have a question from the audience that is perfect for you. Given your scientific background, we had a question from a member of the audience asking, how does one break into project management given work in the lab on the science side? And so given your background, how have you made the transition from working in the lab to large pharma?
Well, aside from my personal career goal is wanting to be a project manager, I really think it is dependent on your personality. And being that communication and clarity is something that's paramount to leading a team, you really have to be willing and able to be the conduit for that communication. So I was always someone who found myself as a scientist and managing other scientists, as that scientist who was always communicating to senior management or between my team members to try to get issues resolved, to try to make sure that we had all our supplies, that we were meeting all our deliverables on time. And it was actually someone who noticed in me that ability to really drive project management. And then I was given that opportunity to just take my ability to communicate with my team members very well and bring that up the chain all the way through senior management. So I think to break into project management, you really have to get a good understanding and foundation of what your team needs are and how you can best communicate that to upper management to meet key deliverables in a critical path.
Great answer. And I think you covered what I was going to ask you anyway about being that conduit and communication between the scientific side and maybe the project management side. So thank you. So I'd like to take this opportunity now to shift gears a little bit into risk management. And Ken, this question will be for you, given your background with some remediation work and setting expectations in terms of communication. Can you talk a little bit about the risk associated with managing a project team and how you're communicating that risk and dealing with it?
Sure, Rich. Thank you. So an important distinction that I found works in one of the organizations I worked for, and I thought it was actually pretty smart idea, is you made a distinction between risk and issues. Risk being something that could happen, and how are you going to accept that risk? Or are you going to mitigate it? Versus an issue, which is basically a risk that has, turned into a serious issue that you want to address. So a risk register, you got to be rigorous about maintaining that, keeping that up to date with your team. And then typically, not unlike a communication plan, actually fitting it in with a communication plan, you would want to have establish with your stakeholders and your team a periodicity that works for communicating risks up and what you're doing about them. A bigger risk is that somebody gets blindsided at the senior stakeholder level. That typically doesn't go well for the project manager.
And Ken, that's a great answer. It leads me right into my next question for Jose. And Jose, we had a little bit of trouble here in that last one as well. I think it got a little bit better, but just want to keep you in the know on that one. But Ken mentioned about communicating risks to maybe senior leadership so they understand exactly what's going on. When that happens, when risks become reality, how do you go about communicating that?
Well, the first thing I do is I keep a risk register, and the risk register I discuss with my sponsor and with the core team. And we actually, as a combined group, we add risks as we're going in the project as well. So those risks are there. They're clear with the sponsor. The first thing I do when a risk becomes reality or close to be is I present a slide with high bullet points of the risk, the issues that lead to the risk, and then just communicate it, go through with the sponsor, then meet with the stakeholders that support the project, right? The higher level. And it's very simple. It's one slide. This is the risk. And not only bring the risk that it's happening is what's the team going to do? What are the options? And whether that leadership position usually sits on the steering committee, ask them for their input as well in that. And then go off and go through.
Excellent, thank you. And Tanya, I'm going to look to you for maybe a real world example of this. Do you have an example of maybe communicating risks or managing risks around an organizational change or just in something that maybe has come up unforeseen?
Yes, well, oftentimes in the biopharmaceutical industry, there will be structural changes, organizational changes. And during that time, you as a project manager want to make sure that you really connect with, let's say, the people that are departing and understand all the information and deliverables that you can receive from them in order to be able to transition and onboard new team members that are joining. So for my particular example, if you are in an environment where you're working with a project team and project team members are leaving and new project members are coming on board, as we said before, the project manager is the conduit to keep that communication going, keep driving that team moving forward. So it's really important to make sure that you meet with new team members, onboard them, introduce yourself as a project manager, and of course keep those risks that have been identified as that which will impact the critical path or a critical key deliverable, and make sure that everyone that's onboarded understands that and as part of the new discussion is invited to all the meetings where you're going to be discussing the strategies for how to mitigate that moving forward, and also identifying if they have a key role to play in resolving those as well.
It sounded like you're sort of fading into some stakeholder management tactics there. Am I right?
That's exactly right.
Got it. All right, Kate, I have a question for the audience from you here. A little complex, so bear with me. So for med device risk management, it's tough to get the team to focus on both the product risk and the project risk. Product risk gets prioritized as a regulatory or quality requirement. So can you maybe recommend a best practice to get the team to focus on both risk efforts simultaneously in product specific things that may be regulatory or quality related, and then overall project risk? I have the feeling the latter is going to be more risk register focused as well.
Well, I think we've discussed risk registers, and I just wanted to, if it, clarity, if it wasn't already said, that risk management is everyone's job. It's not just the project manager's job. So at least in this environment I'm in right now, we're just trying to coach every member of every team that they own their risks, and we're helping them through this journey. We also know that lack of a risk management can cause activities to delay and projects delay and team firefighting. What we also use, not only a tracker, is a risk map or a risk assessment and prioritization heat map. And by categorizing in the various boxes where the Y and X are probability versus impact, anything at the top, which is color coded in reds, those are absolutely the highs and the very high priority risks, which must be discussed with the sponsors. And there must be a plan in place for that. So, I mean, that's really how in this environment we're managing risks right now, and they are always brought up at various forums, including the pre-governance meetings that are every month for each category, and the project review meetings every month. And there's just absolutely no hiding behind any of these. And we talk through them and we understand what the implications are if we do not address head on, mitigate, hand over, but it is always visible to senior management stakeholders and the team, but the team owns them.
I really like that phrase, owning your risks. It seems like it gives everyone some prioritization focus and clarity on what they own and what all of their activities do touch, but also, as you mentioned, the tool to help with prioritization that things must get communicated is a really good way to keep everyone informed, including senior leadership.
Rich, could I chime in on this for just a second?
Absolutely can.
So one other thought I had to add to that is that what I have found is when you're doing your risk register for your project, to categorize, in certain instances, categorize your project risk. So a product risk I would make that a subset of my project risk so that everybody understands the interdependency of not fixing the product risk, its impact on the project. So for instance, if it's a major issue with the device and it's going to impact the schedule or the budget or whatever, those are the buttons that senior management and stakeholders seem to really respond to. So I would make interdependency between the product risk and the project risk is understood and they're integrated in how you're communicating.
I appreciate that. I think that again, it goes back to the communication piece you mentioned, the clarity piece that Kate mentioned. It's this focus on interdependencies. Everyone has to be on the same page, given the subset risk here. So I wanted to shift gears here as we head into the home stretch. Jose, would you mind briefly giving us maybe a summary of what you feel that a project manager faces in today's life sciences environment?
It's the biggest challenge is global teams. I would say, you have different ways of doing things, and people are all over the place. Right now, the project that I'm on, everyone's remote, everybody, different countries. I also believe the challenges, one of the biggest challenges, mitigating risks can be challenges. Just controlling the scope, making sure the cost scope and don't slip too much. I believe that just being a leader can be a better mitigation to having those challenges. PM, it's all you want, but leadership skills is where you eliminate those challenges, because then you have a team that's functional and it's committed and in the game with you. So I believe that's a big challenge. We also we're not their bosses. We have to influence them to be committed and do exactly what the team needs to do to finish the project. You got to use those leadership skills, influential skills that you can have. But once you get through that, it just becomes, as we sit here in the panel, you have the meetings, you have your regular issues, you go through the risk mitigation, you own them, right? Everybody owns them. Then you can be a much fluid team and much more successful.
Yeah, I think that the high level of leadership and influencing skills, it plays a part from the beginning of any project. And hopefully as you attack those challenges, you're able to sharpen yours as a PM personally as well. Tanya, same question to you, if you wouldn't mind discussing something that you found as a challenge in your career as a project manager.
Sure. I mean, as organizations grow, as projects bigger, and there are more key stakeholders. Your core team grow, your global core team grows. Everyone is on a different time schedule. You really want to work very efficiently in that aspect. So you want to make sure that when you do have the time to meet with your team, that you meet on a regular cadence, that everyone understands the need and the priority to be there at that time. You as a project manager can do your best to understand everyone else's schedules, but project team members need to, once they have a cadence and they know they need to be there, they will show up. You want to make sure that your agendas will speak to every single functional area that is represented at that meeting. So everyone does have that efficient time to interact with each other, talk with each other, discuss action items. Whereas perhaps maybe having one-on-ones with cross-functional team members outside of this larger meeting might cause a breakdown in communication. Key members might not have that time to really speak with each other in one-on-one meetings. So, taking into consideration people's time and really organizing the most efficient and effective meetings you can through using PM tools such as agendas and meeting minutes, using a roster to have your correct individuals listed there is extremely helpful.
Great, thank you. And Kate, I just wanted to ask you a little more about stakeholder management within your organization and throughout your career. What are some of your best practices for managing not only managing the team, but also managing the stakeholders who have any sort of interest or need to know that your project is going to come through successfully?
Sure. Very early in a project, when a team comes together, if you're doing a kickoff meeting, so to speak, and there is one exercise that I've used called the stakeholder mapping. And really understanding, and it's a 4-box grid, and where you have level of influence versus level of commitment, and we understand placing all the different key stakeholders around this grid. You really want to focus on what your communication plan is with those stakeholders that have high influence and low commitment, because you want to keep your enemies close, so to speak, and understand exactly what the challenges are and the hurdles are for them, and try to break down that barrier, keep them constantly advised.
I like that. So maybe your enemies, those who could stand in the way of getting the project done.
Correct.
Great. All right. Well, I want to finish up here as we hit the home stretch with one last question, maybe 30 seconds or less, so we make sure we're respecting everyone's time here. Ken, have you had some advice for Ken Sabata breaking into the life science industry as a fresh-faced project manager? What would you tell him?
Well, I'm going to answer two ways. One, I wanted to come back to the question asked by the person, how does one break into project management? Mm-hmm. Piece of advice, and that is, as a lab scientist and having managed a team that was involved with lab scientists, suggestion I would have is to talk to your manager and to the project management office about being the core team member for the lab. Inevitably, always the lab has a lead on a project. So ask if you can take that role, and that'll help give you some experience in managing a sub-team on a project. The other advice that I would offer is that comes to not being afraid to acknowledging when you don't know something, but basically saying, I'll go get you the answer. It's under pressure, especially in risk discussions and in status meetings. Oftentimes you feel pressured to give an answer when you don't really know the answer. And I have found that it's much better just to say, I'll get you the answer, because misinformation has a way of just propagating like crazy. You're better off making sure people have accurate information.
Excellent. Thank you. Jose, briefly, advice for a growing project manager?
Yeah, seek out a mentor that's a project manager within the organization, or it could be out of the organization. But get yourself a mentor. Start preparing yourself for P&P, because as you're learning those activities, as you're studying, and take your time to study, and in no time you'll be involved in your project.
Great, thank you. Tanya, advice for a growing project manager?
This is always my favorite question. So aside from the great advice that Ken and Jose gave, the one thing I would piece of advice I would give to a new project manager is, inevitably you're going to run into a situation where there's going to be an issue, a problem, something that is holding back your timeline, a key deliverable. You can identify those, but instead of proposing this to your team as a problem, come with solutions. Come with a plan to discuss with your team on some of the ideas you have as a PM for how to meet these deliverables. And I think you'll find that in that solution, in that scenario, that any solution that you do give will be welcomed by your team members, and it'll really show that as your PM, you're taking the initiative to really drive some solutions and not just identify problems. And I think that's very important.
I think that's great advice. Kate, if you wouldn't mind bringing us home.
Yeah, really quickly. There was a program in place where I used to work, and we called it a secondment program, which is really, get yourself a 6-month rotation into project management. And inevitably, those folks were the people that we in project management would offer a full-time job to. But it was great training. They were thrown in the deep end. And they were usually just these really bright stars that were in the labs, and we would roam around looking for them, and it was a fabulous program at the organization I was at.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And with that, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of our panelists today for taking a half hour of the day to take some questions and discuss a little bit about their past. I'd like to also thank everyone for attending today. Again, we are the FlexPro Group, Project Management for the Life Sciences. You can follow us at www.theflexprogroup.com. Check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter for updates. And with that, I'd like to wish you a happy holiday season and best rest of your weekend. Thanks.